Elder, I am afraid of delusion. That's good. Whoever fears delusion does not fall into it because he watches over himself, speaks all his thoughts, hides nothing, and thus gains humility. Elder, what is the predisposition for delusion? The predisposition for delusion is when you have the idea that you are someone or something, and others point out to you that you are doing something important. When you think you have reached a spiritual measure because you practice, for example, some ascetic feat, but you think of others as if they still haven't grasped the concept of spiritual life, and you act proudly. When someone, through egoism, forces himself into ascetic effort, as if he would reach the measure of some saint so that others would admire him for it. That is the beginning of delusion. It is one thing to compel yourself, but another to commit violence against yourself. I once said to a man, "Be careful not to fall into delusion. You are not on the right path." "To fall into delusion?" he said, "but I don't even eat meat." He confesses his sins before an icon. I asked him, "Are you Orthodox or Protestant? Where did you even find that written?" "So what?" "Doesn't Christ hear me like this?" He replied again. "Do you hear that?" Elder, does bodily asceticism help in the struggle against passions? If one practices it with that goal, it helps. The body is humbled, and the flesh submits to the spirit. However, dry asceticism leads to pride, giving birth to spiritual passions. Pride swells ever more, self-confidence increases, and all that leads to delusion. Seeing his external ascetic effort, a man draws conclusions about his own spiritual progress. I do this and that one over there is lazy. I've reached the level of such and such saint. I've surpassed him. And he multiplies his fasts and vigils. But in the end, all that effort has no goal of subduing passions, but rather of selfish satisfaction with oneself. I knew one monk who practiced asceticism out of pride, and the thought had convinced him that he had become a great ascetic. He fell into a very bad state. He stopped eating, completely stopped washing, and lived in filth. His clothes were completely worn out. I took them to wash, but what was there to wash? They were utterly rotten. Once he told me, "I have surpassed St. John the hut dweller." "Really?" I said. "Did St. John spend his time covered in filth?" After a few days, when I came again, he said to me, "Now I have surpassed even St. Maximus Cavsocalivites." "And how did you manage to surpass him?" I asked. "Well, I've been wandering all over Mount Athos like a spinning top," he replied. "But St. Maximus became bodiless and flew." I said, "He didn't spin around like you." Later, he began to struggle to gain self-condemnation unto death, saying to himself, "Now you are in hell." Not long after, in order to appear humble, he began to say, "Now I am a devil, Satan, and I must go gather my followers." And thus he ended up in delusion. Elder, you told us that during prayer we should avoid imagining different scenes from Christ's life and similar things. Why? So that the devil wouldn't lead us into delusion through imagination. Imagination itself is good. It has great power, but it must be used properly. Some people, for example, can see a landscape and then, even a year later, recall exactly what it looked like and draw it. God gave man this ability, but the devil abuses it. People who are in delusion imagine everything they see or read according to their own whims, and later believe these imagined images as if they were real. One must pray a great deal for them, so that God might help them, because the devil constantly confuses them. Therefore, a person who naturally has a developed imagination must think carefully when they notice they do not think rightly, and must question their own thoughts. I knew a simple woman who constantly prayed and begged Christ to appear to her in this life. She told him, "If you don't appear to me, I will not see you even in the next life." And Christ did not appear to her. It truly happened during Holy Communion, in the Holy Chalice, in the form of a newborn baby with bloody strands of hair. Then it disappeared, and she was able to take communion. After this event, the devil began to plant thoughts in her mind that she was someone special. From then on, he constantly played scenes in her imagination, showing her visions. Once, when I came back from Mount Athos, I found her in a house, telling these fantasies to the gathered men and women. I really struggled to bring her to her senses. The only solution was to scold her openly in front of everyone, so she would become aware of her delusion and calm down. What she was saying, was it fantasy? Fantasy and delusion. Elder, and she didn't tell her spiritual father anything about it? You know what happens? Satan deceives a person with what he shows them, and if the person doesn't recognize it as a problem, they don't even think to confess it to their spiritual father. What a master that devil is. Terrible. If a person isn't careful with their imagination, the cunning one can even use an ordinary natural event to deceive them. In the monastery of Stomi, during winter, I would heat the stove when reading the evening service. Some women who occasionally came to the monastery noticed that during the evening service, sounds of cree-cree were coming from the icons of the Mother of God. I hadn't noticed it myself, and they told others. While the monk was reading the evening service, we heard cree-cree from the icons. When I heard that, I said, "Let me see that icon that makes the cree-cree sound." I don't believe in such miraculous occurrences. I believe that the Mother of God appears to people and speaks with them, and even those who are in a good spiritual state may be allowed to see her. But still, one must be cautious. I climbed onto a chair and looked. What had actually happened? The icon was old and had little nails. When the stove was burning, the heat would expand the wood and the nails would creak, creating the sound cree-cree. I hammered one nail in, and the noise stopped. Later, I asked the women, "Do you hear it now?" "No," they replied. "Well then, don't attach any importance to that," I said. One must be careful, because when a person gives into imagination, it gradually becomes stronger, and their entire life can pass in vain. Elder, how can we know when something truly comes from God and when it comes from the devil? That's obvious. When something isn't from God, the devil brings proud thoughts to a person. After that, the devil acts in such a way that the person begins to blaspheme. Once, a possessed man came to me, one who was also deluded. I told him some things, and it helped him. And do you know what he told me? This is the first time I've ever heard something like this. Not even in the Gospel have I read anything like it. It was as if he said to me, "You speak better than Christ." Do you understand what the devil does to arouse prideful thoughts in a person? In any case, if a man does not realize that he can achieve nothing by his own strength, but that everything he does by the power of Christ, then even if he drives out 1,000 demons from a person, it means nothing. A person who has no spiritual experience, who has not tasted a higher heavenly joy, if he is not careful, can easily fall into delusion. The devil is cunning. He slightly excites a person's heart so that they feel some kind of satisfaction, deceiving them by creating the impression that this satisfaction is something spiritual, divine. He steals the heart's peace, and the person thinks they are on the right path. "I feel some disturbance," they might say. Yes, but what they feel is not true spiritual joy. Spiritual joy is something heavenly. The devil can also appear in the form of an angel or a saint. Disguised as an angel or saint, the devil spreads disturbance around him. Whatever causes unrest is from him. A true angel or saint always radiates heavenly joy and peace. A humble and pure-hearted person, even if inexperienced, can distinguish between an angel of God and the devil who appears as an angel of light, because the former brings spiritual purity and calm, while the latter stirs turmoil. But a proud and worldly person can easily be deceived by the cunning devil. If a person summons a humble thought, when the devil appears in the form of an angel of light, he will immediately vanish. One evening, while I was in the monastery of Stomi, after dinner, I was sitting in my cell on a small chair, praying. Suddenly, I heard the sounds of an organ and clarinet coming from a building not far from the monastery, which served as a guest house. I wondered to myself, what are these instruments playing so close by? I asked myself. The monastery's feast had already passed. I stood up and went to see what was happening outside. I looked around. Everywhere was silence. Then I realized that it had been the devil's doing, trying to interrupt my prayer. I went back and continued praying. Suddenly, a strong light filled the cell. The ceiling disappeared, the roof opened up, and I saw a pillar of light reaching all the way to heaven. At the top of this pillar of light appeared the face of a young man with long, light hair and beard, who looked like Christ. Since I could only see half of his face, I stood up from the chair so that I could see him fully. Then I heard a voice within me saying, "You have been found worthy to see Christ." And who am I, a worthless man, to be worthy to see Christ? I thought, and made the sign of the cross. At that very moment, the light and the seeming Christ disappeared, and I saw how the ceiling lamp returned to its place. If a man does not keep his head well guarded, the devil will implant a proud thought and deceive him with fantasies and false brightness, which lead not to paradise, but to chaos. That is why one should never seek light or divine grace or anything similar, but repentance. Repentance brings humility, and without it, the good God does not give true grace. When I was once on Mount Sinai, in the hermitage of Saint Episteme, the devil wanted to serve me. The hermitage had 3 or 4 steps. At night, when the stars shone brightly in the sky, I would go down to the caves. As I was descending the steps, I would light my lighter. Once, when I wanted to light it, it wouldn't work. At one moment, I saw a light coming from the rock, as if from a powerful reflector. Flash! Oh, the whole area was illuminated. Well, it's better to get away from this light, I thought, and turned back. The light immediately disappeared. Man, that devil! He couldn't light my lighter, but he made that light shine. Isn't it a pity to torment yourself so much? Look, I'll light your way for you. What deceit! Elder, how did you know that the light wasn't from God? Well, that's obvious. Frightening. Elder, I'm tormented by some terrible dreams. When you have a bad dream, never try to analyze what you saw, how you saw it, or whether you are to blame. How much it is your fault. Since the devil cannot tempt you during the day, he comes to you at night. Sometimes even God allows the devil to tempt us in our dreams, so that we may realize that the old man within us has not yet died. Sometimes, again, the devil approaches a person in a dream and shows him different visions to disturb him even while he sleeps. That is why you should not give any importance to dreams. Make the sign of the cross. Cross yourself and your pillow, hang a cross and 2 icons above your pillow, and say a prayer until you fall asleep. The more attention you give them, the more the enemy will come to trouble you. This happens not only to adults, but also to children. Even very young children are visited by the devil while they sleep, frightening them as they dream. But since they are innocent little angels, the angels soon return, and the children wake up either from joy or from distress. The dreams that the devil brings are merely an external influence of the enemy upon the person while he sleeps. Elder, what about when we feel some kind of heaviness in our sleep? Often that's simply the result of restlessness a person experiences during the day, or from various fears, tension, and similar things. You see, the devil can take advantage of that, connect it all somehow, and thus frighten the person. Many times, the sleep is so light that the person thinks he is awake and prays for that heaviness, which takes away even his breath, to stop. Sometimes the devil can even take on the form of a man or a saint, and thus appear to a person in a dream. Once the devil appeared in the likeness of Saint Ascenios to a sick man and said to him, "I am Saint Ascenios, and I have come to tell you that you will die. Do you hear me? You will die." The man was terrified. A saint would never speak to a sick person in such a way. Even if the sick person truly had to die, and a saint was sent to inform him of his impending death, the saint would say it gently, like this: "Since God has seen how much you are suffering, He will soon take you from this world. Try to prepare yourself." He would never say, "Do you hear me? You will die." Elder, what about when someone screams in a dream? It's better for them to wake up. Many dreams are distressing. When a person is tense or tired, he struggles with that within himself, and later sees it in a dream. It often happens to me that when I have spent the day dealing with different problems or with unjust situations that happen to people and such things, later in a dream, I rebuke someone. "Hey, you godless one," I shout. "How insensitive you are," and wake up from my own shouting. Elder, can someone foresee what will happen to them based on their dreams? No, don't give dreams any significance at all. Whether they are pleasant or unpleasant, a person should not believe them, because there is a danger of falling into delusion. 95% of dreams are deceptive. That is why the Holy Fathers say we should not give them any importance. A very small number of dreams come from God. But for someone to interpret them, they must possess purity and certain spiritual qualities, like the righteous Joseph and the prophet Daniel, who had that gift from God. "I will tell you," said the prophet Daniel to King Nebuchadnezzar, "both what dream you had and what it means." But what a state he had reached. He was in the den with the lions, and they did him no harm, even though they were hungry. The prophet Habakkuk brought him food and said, "Remember me, O Lord." When God would not have remembered the prophet Daniel, who would he have remembered? Elder, some people don't dream. And it's better that they don't. They don't spend money on tickets or gas. In a dream, in a single moment, you can see something that in reality would last for hours or days, because time ceases to exist in a dream. From there, one can understand the words of the psalm, "For 1,000 years in your eyes are as yesterday when it is past." Elder, what should we say to people when they tell us about their visions, or how they saw some saint or something similar? It's best to tell them to be cautious. That's safer, because not everyone can discern whether a vision is from God or from the devil. But even when a vision is from God, one should not accept it immediately. God, in some way, moves a person when he sees that his creature does not accept visions, for that shows humility. If the one who appeared was truly a saint, God can later make it known in another way and lead the person where he wishes. One must be cautious because the devil can also press a button, and then the TV program begins. There was a woman who had no one among people to help her, so she had the right to divine help. God showed her something in a vision to help her. However, afterward, the devil put a thought in her mind. Who knows? Maybe God granted me this vision because I am destined for something exalted. From the moment she believed that, the devil began to act and to command her. But in the end, God again took pity on her. She had one vision and heard a voice saying to her, "Write to Father Paisios all the visions you have had." So she wrote me a letter with all the visions she had. The devil had completely deceived her. They were true visions, but they came from evil. Of all the visions she listed, only the first and the last were from God. The last vision was sent by God so that she could come to her senses and free herself from delusion. I explained to her what I am now telling you, and she recovered. Elder, how can we know that someone is in delusion? That can be understood only based on their appearance. A deluded person outwardly shows false calmness. He seems humble and meek, but inside he hides a great idea about himself. If you pay attention to his gaze, you will see that he looks at other people as if they were wretches, like ants. You can also recognize it from what he says. There was once a deluded man, whom many considered a saint. He claimed that Christ had appeared to him, patting him on the shoulder while riding a horse and holding a bottle of wine in his hands. Since Christ often honored him with wine, he acquired the gift of transparency. Once, while he was talking with some people, a man asked him, "Why can't I also perform miracles?" "Because you haven't committed that and that sin," the man replied. The unfortunate man was stunned, so he came to tell me about it. "Well," I said, "have the saints ever mocked people?" "Only the devil mocks." "Don't you understand that it's the devil speaking?" Even if what the deluded man says is true, it still comes from the devil. A woman once told me how she took a possessed woman to a certain man she had heard could cast out demons. He received them and took them to a ruined chapel. As soon as they entered the chapel, he put on an epitrachelion, a priest's stole, and placed it on himself. The woman was startled. "Are you a priest?" "I am," he replied, "a layman and a priest." And then he began to make the sign of the cross over the poor woman. Thus she realized that he was a man in delusion, so she grabbed the possessed woman and ran away. Elder, is a person who is deluded also mentally ill? Not always. One thing is delusion, and another is mental illness. Some people fall only into delusion, while others fall into delusion and also lose their mental balance. I knew a monk on Mount Athos who never listened to anyone. He fled from his monastery and wandered around the holy mountain. 4 or 5 times he came to me, pretending that he was practicing asceticism, and each time I advised him to return to the monastery where he had been tonsured. In the end, he bought a cell and began to live in it. After 7 months, he came to me again. "Go back to your monastery," I told him. "I have now received a letter of release from my monastery. They no longer accept me there," he replied. "Be careful. Be very careful," I said. "At least find some elder to live in obedience and not by your own will." "I will be obedient to the will of God," he said. "Well then, go to the monastery," I said. "Now that I have become a hermit, should I go back?" "You go," he told me. "Should I go alone?" "If you want to come with me, I will do it with all my heart," I said. "You know what?" he said again. "If you are bored of aimless wandering and want to go to the monastery, then go." When I saw that he was behaving so insolently toward me, I left him. Not long after, I learned that he had become possessed and had lost his mind. The devil appeared to him in the likeness of the Mother of God and said to him, "My child, if you fall down and bow to me, I will give you 7 gifts of the Holy Spirit." Then he thought, "I will receive 7 gifts, and all will be subject to me." And he fell to his knees to bow. As soon as he bowed, the devil entered him. He became possessed. But with that demonic shaking, his mind was also disturbed. Later, he came to the Holy Assembly to become a protos. He locked the fathers who were there, took the protos's staff, and, whispering something, began to descend the stairs. The others saw the new protos coming down. They began to follow him in a line, and a bit later they picked him up from there and took him to a mental hospital. He was no longer possessed by a demon, but the mental illness remained. Father isn't a person who is deluded in some way also demonized. Of course, a man in delusion can indeed have more demons in him than one who is demonized. But still, delusion is one thing, and possession is another. There are 2 or 3 spiritual fathers who have a little piety mixed with a certain mental deficiency, and they deceive people. They consider everyone demon-possessed. They listen to no one. "I am a priest," they say. "I have authority." If someone tells you about such a case, warn the people because they bring harm to the church. Tell them, find a proper spiritual father to whom you will go for help. Those spiritual fathers even go so far as to use my name, even my photograph, so that people might get the impression that they have some connection with me. Such people always have some excuse because they themselves are careless. But there are also some dishonest ones who show vinegar as if it were wine. One such man was once a bookbinder and worked somewhere, and now he roams all over northern Greece, presenting himself as my disciple. He tells people that I gave him the gift of discernment and 4 or 5 other gifts, thus deceiving people and collecting money. Is he a priest? No, a layman. I saw him once in Daphne, but he hid so that I wouldn't see him because he is the one who says, "My true child." Luckily, he loves to drink. So he felt uneasy. So some of those who saw him drunk started thinking a little. How many such frauds there are who exploit people's pain and turn it into business. One such man said to a certain widow, "One of your husband's arms is not completely decayed, because his soul needs prayers." "What should I do now?" the poor woman asked. "I will pray for your husband's soul," he said. After she gave him enough money, after some time he told her, "Well, we have avoided the first danger. Things are a little better now." The woman kept giving him money again and again until he took half her property, supposedly so her husband could find peace. There are also deluded people who lay their hands on the sick, mutter something, and claim to heal them. People believe this. They don't go to confession, nor do they call a priest to perform the sacrament of anointing, but they give these people a pile of money. I was told that in one village there lived 2 such deluded men who worked very well together. The devil would send someone from their village, for example, a man with a severe headache or a stiff neck. Then he would go to one of the 2 deceivers and say, "This and that man has a terrible headache because of such and such a reason." Later, when that deluded man would meet the sick person, he would say, "I know why your head hurts," and immediately explain the cause. "What a revelation," the man would say. "And what should I do for the pain to go away?" "Go to so-and-so," he would reply, sending him to the other deceiver. Do you see what the devil devised to keep people in delusion? It so happened that these 2 deluded men worked together. One would give the diagnosis, and the other would supposedly heal, all to keep people away from the church. Elder, why do people, when they have some problem, often turn to the deluded? Because the devil has cheap gifts, and they are easy to receive. What the deluded tell people to do is not hard to fulfill, and thus they calm them with their passions. Instead of repenting for the sins they have committed and going to a spiritual father to confess, they find some deluded man who is possessed by the devil and ask him to solve their problems. And then they suffer, not realizing that the devil has bound them and is commanding them. Elder, why do they believe him? People are deceived. Many of those who speak and claim to lead people on the right path actually have the devil hiding behind them. However, God does not allow him to stay completely hidden. Sometimes he lets a horn or a tail stick out through a crack, and when people see something like that, they scream in horror. What's that? A horn? A tail? No, what are you talking about? That's a button, say those around him, to fool the people and make the devilish things seem good and useful. One day, a certain deluded man came here together with a group of people. About 10 people gathered around him, and he called himself Elder. I asked them, "Do you belong to any organization?" They did not answer. Any association? No answer. Do you have a spiritual father? Nothing. Then he began to perform strange movements. The man had brought them here so he could deceive them. And afterward they said, "We also went to Elder Paisios, but he disagrees with us." Do you see? I shouldn't have met with him because he later used it for his own ends. He seemed suspicious, and his followers were deceived. Poor people, they were kneeling on their knees. "Elder, didn't you tell them anything?" "I did, but when they leave here, the devil will tell them something else. One way or another, he brings them back onto his path." Elder, how can a person protect themselves from the deluded? By remaining within the fence of our church. Of course, if someone follows the deluded out of ignorance, God will not abandon them. He will help them realize their mistake and return to the truth. Elder, how can a person who has deluded ideas come to their senses? They must become aware of their bad state, stop trusting their own thoughts, confess all their thoughts to their spiritual father, and obey everything their spiritual father tells them. They should constantly seek God's mercy so that divine grace may return to them. In other words, they must humble themselves in order to come to their senses and be saved. And you see, the judgments and ways of God are unfathomable. Ah, the love of God knows no bounds. One man used to come to my cell often, and he always had only deluded ideas. He didn't want to listen to anything I told him. He understood everything the wrong way. When he left Mount Athos, he began to preach and caused great harm. He said he had received commands from me and thus deceived people. He even showed them a book I had given him as a blessing, saying that people should trust him and cooperate with him. Once, while he was talking about various things, at one point, divine grace had completely abandoned him, and he began to insult Christ and the Mother of God with terribly vile words. Then people became alarmed and dispersed. Later, he was taken by some security vehicle and placed in a mental hospital. Do you see how far God's love reaches? He even allows blasphemy against his own name, only so that he might help his creations and save them. Elder, if a deluded person realizes his delusion and repents, will his followers also repent? If he truly repents, he should humble himself, admit his mistake, and try to bring his followers back onto the right path. But if his deluded ideas are exposed while he himself remains in delusion, then it is necessary to enlighten his followers in some appropriate way. because some deluded people go so far as to spread their ideas within the church. Then there is a danger that his followers, if they suddenly realize that what they heard from him was delusion, might be scandalized and turn away from the church.